afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to be speaking about a meteoric figure in 19th century occultism, Edward Bulwer-Lytton. Specifically, in the course of my lecture, I'll address his theories of trance states and his experiments with magic, mediumship, and of course, the exalted imagination. Next slide. And here's the picture. To get a better feel of Lytton's personality and milieu, I've divided the lecture into three main sections. Lytton, next slide. There we go. Lytton the gentleman, Lytton the occultist, and Lytton the theoretician. For us, this will be a journey to the interior regions of the Earth. We'll start at the tip of the iceberg, at the esoteric surface, and examine Lytton as an accomplished litterateur and Tory statesman. Next, we'll pop a red pill and get a little bit and go a little bit further down the rabbit hole and come to know Lytton the occultist, the consultant of mediums and hypnotists, and the confidant of Eliphas Levi. After that, we'll come to the heart of the matter, the chthonic arcanum of Lytton's interpretation of magical phenomena. Next slide. So Lytton was born to a well-off landowning family in May 1803 in London. In 1822, he matriculated at Trinity Hall, Cambridge, the alma mater of John Dee. Coincidence? He graduated with a BA in 1825. According to his grandson, Victor Bulwer-Lytton, his favorite subjects were English literature, metaphysics, and political economy. In 1827, Lytton married an Irish actress named Rosina Wheeler. They had 2 kids and ultimately separated in 1835. Despite his tempestuous personal life, Lytton managed to maintain an active political career. In fact, Lytton was a lifelong politician, and he spent 30-some-odd years as a conservative MP and civil servant. He was also allegedly offered the throne of Greece in 1862. I kid you not. After King Otto abdicated, British imperialists went looking for high-born Philhellenic Englishmen to rule the country. Lytton ultimately refused the honor. Nevertheless, he was elevated to the peerage in 1866, becoming the inimitable Lord Lytton. Next slide. So I have here just a list of some of his works. As you can see, he was a very prolific writer. This isn't even a comprehensive list. Although he is best known to occultists and science fiction enthusiasts for his novels Zanoni, A Strange Story, and The Coming Race, Lytton's chief works were popular novels that were largely devoid of esoteric elements. Overall, Lytton was a well-regarded man of letters and was praised by many of the leading writers of his day, including Charles Dickens and Thomas Carlyle. And next slide. It's time to lift the veil. Let me start off by saying that Lytton was pretty much a Rosicrucian without a membership card, which is to say that he was in the very enviable position of not having to pay any dues. He certainly wasn't a Freemason, and he seems to have disliked groups that openly called themselves Freemasons. Nonetheless, Lytton was evidently a longtime student of occult literature and an investigator of hypnotism, spiritualism, phrenology, and oneurology. He was an associate of the mesmeric Dr. John Elliotson, the pioneering hypnotist James Braid, and the Scottish-American medium Daniel Douglas Home. He even hosted the Home family at his Knebworth estate and claimed to have personally questioned the conjured spirits. Now, we probably don't have enough time to delve into all of Lytton's occult researches and exploits, and there are many. Trust me on this one. But for the purposes of this lecture, I'd like to hone in on his relationship with the then greatest living Western magician, Eliphas Levi. Next slide. In his highly informative book, The Theosophical Enlightenment, Jocelyn Goodwin mentions that Lytton participated in one of Eliphas Levi's ceremonial evocations in May 1861 at the Pantheon, a department store and events venue on Regent Street, London. Unfortunately, it's no longer there. So, it's a somewhat folkloric claim because the earliest mention of the event is in A.E. Waite's introduction to Levi's Mysteries of Magic. Waite speaks about a letter from Levi in the Lytton family papers, which details the ceremony, but gives no further references. To verify these claims, my wife and I paid a visit to the Hertfordshire local archives and translated the letter. We found no mention of the Pantheon, but there is useful information about Levi's early views on trance. Next slide. And here's a little picture of the last page of the letter. It's in French. And on the next slide, I have an excerpt from the letter. And I will just read it for you. Now, some of this, I'm including it here because some of what Levi has said actually occurred in Bulwer-Lytton's Strange Story, which was published in 1861, around the same time of the supposed evocation. Now, the first quote says, the soul of evocations is the exalted sympathy. The means is the perseverance and acts of the sympathy, with inflexible tension of the will towards vision. The instrument is all the stimulants of the strongest passions, such as high ambition, fear, etc., and all physical works that overexcite the nervous system in the fact of the desired vision, fast, for instance, long meditations in nocturnal solitude, or in the tombs, the meticulous and annoying practices that break and force the will to align constantly to the same intention. Now that's from the letter. And I've included another passage here from Transcendental Magic. To behold these strange forms, we must put ourselves in an abnormal condition akin to sleep or death. I think this is something we've been hearing about constantly throughout this conference. In other words, we must magnetize ourselves and enter into a kind of lucid and waking somnambulism. So I'd now like to move on to Lytton the theoretician, bearing in mind 2 points: the mind-altering nature of sympathy or rapport, and the inherent clairvoyance of the sleeping awake state. So we come at last to Lytton's own thoughts about trance and the force of the imagination. Keeping in mind Levi's remarks, let's have a look at Lytton's own words. So this is a letter to Lytton's friend, John Forster, and I've put in bold a few of the important points, but I'll just read the whole entire thing to put the point across. I do believe in the substance of what used to be called magic. That is, I believe that there are persons of a peculiar temperament who can effect very extraordinary things not accounted for satisfactorily by any existent philosophy. You will observe that the constitution or temperament is always more or less the same in these magicians, whether they are clairvoyant or medium. The wonders are produced through them and cease in their absence or inactivity. In their own constitution, I find a remarkable agreement. It is only persons who are highly susceptible of electricity who have it, and their power is influenced according as the atmosphere is more or less charged with electricity. Next slide. So the next slide is a section from an essay in Caxtonia, which was in 1865. And I forgot to mention that the previous letter that you just saw was also written in 1861. So this would have been supposedly around the time that he would have done the evocation with Levi. The phenomenon ascribed to magic is centered on rare effects producible on certain constitutions. Next slide. These are two passages from A Strange Story, published in 1861, one of Lytton's popular novels about mysterious happenings, and a very Rosicrucian-like main character who's also a villain. All such mediums are of the electric temperament, thus everywhere found allied with the ecstatic, and their power varies in proportion as the state of the atmosphere serves to suppress or augment the electricity stored in themselves. The enchanters and magicians arrived by diverse practices at the faculty of provoking in other brains a determined order of dreams, of engendering hallucinations of all kinds. In this trance, there is an extraordinary cerebral activity, a projectile force given to the mind, distinct from the soul, yada yada yada, just as a flower, in an altered condition of atmosphere, sends forth the particles of its aroma. This should not surprise you. Your thought travels over land and sea in your waking state. Thought, too, can travel in trance, and in trance may acquire an intensified force. And as they say in Zanoni, dream manfully, for thy dreams are prophets. Next slide. And this is from Godolphin, written in 1833, one of his early novels. By this spirit within the flesh, the imagination, we grow from the flesh and may see and at length invoke the souls of the dead and receive warnings and hear omens and girdle our sleep with dreams. And the final quote from 1854, a letter to Lady Combermere. Lytton says, "Spectral phenomena are dreams turned inside out." I think this is a very, very important quote for my essay here. So next slide. So what I have here is my position for a theory of dream casting within Lytton's works. So I say that dream casting is the art of conjuring or casting an atmosphere of sublimated consciousness, in which the dream state, ordinarily an interior experience, is, as Lytton explains, turned inside out. Dreamcasters have natural or acquired electric temperaments, and the phenomena that they produce is situational and intersubjective, dependent on the sympathetic rapport of all persons involved. Dreamcasters can evoke deep-set memories and project apparitional manifestations. And to sum up, I think that this idea of the art of the dream is extremely significant because, particularly within Lytton's works and Levi's works, it popularized a form of intellectual or demonstrable and explicable magic that inspired major occultists, at least initially, like Aleister Crowley and H.P. Blavatsky, who frequently referenced Lytton, and I believe Crowley was very, very, very strongly inspired by Zanoni. So, my last slide is I just want to give thanks to Translates for hosting me. And of course, people, if you have any questions, we're going to have some time to speak. But if you have any other questions for me, feel free to contact me at thinkersgarden.com. And we have other articles up there as well that might be interesting to many people. I don't know if I ran over the time or...
You're out of time.
Oh, okay.
You've got 20 minutes for questions.
Christina?
Hi, thank you. Thank you mostly for that. My question is to do with your very last slide, which absolutely electrified me. If I understand it right, it thinks that there are special people who, blah, blah, blah. And then there's your that line where dependent on the sympathetic rapport of all persons involved. And two things came to mind, and I just wondered if you might comment on them or expand on this or say more about what you mean by that or what you think he meant by that. I found myself thinking of spiritualist circles, and I found myself also thinking about members of a magical lodge. And members of a magical lodge are bound by fraternal oaths in some form or other. I don't know how strong those are in the Golden Dawn, and in spiritualism, there's often like praying together or singing together or holding hands. And I just wondered if those made an influence, or were there examples in Lytton's life of where I don't know, the community of the people mattered, and there's the charisma of the individual. Yeah, I get that. You know, the medium, the person who can make things happen. But I just wondered if you'd say more about what you mean and what you meant by the sympathy of those involved.
Well, he was certainly influenced by his experience with Daniel Dungla's home. And in fact, he had the home family at Nebworth several times. And one time he claimed, and he has this in one of his letters, he claimed that he felt a hand grab him, and he couldn't explain what was happening within the spiritualist circle. I think another time he was questioning the spirit that was conjured or that appeared, and about his daughter actually died very young. So the spirit was giving him answers that nobody living would ever know. And he was quite convinced by that, but at the same time he maintained this rationalism, sort of just like Levi and also with Crowley, where there's this phenomenon happening which is extraordinary, but they were saying, well, I can't say it's supernatural, but I can't really explain it either. This is the best way I can explain it. But I would say he did have personal experience with this sort of thing. And I would say that so far as the ceremony goes with Levi in 1861, in Strange Story, there is in one of the footnotes, he mentions la ternaire or something, but the fact that at a magical evocation, you need to have 3 people present, which is interesting because this is something that Waite says as well, and that there was John Ashburner, Lytton, and Levi doing these ceremonies together and possibly witnessing these.
Did you think they had to like one another? No, I mean, that's when you say sympathy. I mean, is that not something really?
I think that I'm not sure if Levi and Lytton genuinely really had this sort of affable friendship, but they certainly, I certainly think that Lytton believed very much in Levi as somebody who had done many, many different things and was also a very charismatic person. And I think as long as that faith was there, that rapport was there, who knows what could happen in this type of circle or environment.
And who did you say the third one was?
John Ashburner, I believe, Dr. Ashburner.
Oh, thank you.
Who was Ashburner had written a few things on mesmerism.
Oh, right.
I think there was a question back in the wall.
Yeah, I had a few comments. When it comes to Bulwer-Lytton's attitude towards spiritualism, there was this committee, the London Dialectical Committee, created in 1871, who made interviews to everybody who was something in the view of spiritualism, to ask opinions and mention experiences. And Bulwer-Lytton was invited, so he gave his opinion about spiritualism. And in the end, the opinion, as you said, exactly, was rather prudent. So he certainly cannot be called a spiritualist. He said that he had participated in seances, but in the end, the evidence was not convincing to him, at least in terms of supporting the actual theory of spiritualism. Although he acknowledged that something may happen, but exactly what the explanation of that remained a little bit in parentheses. When it comes to these passages, I think the source of this, even when it comes to the language, is actually animal magnetism. much more than spiritualism. This is where this is coming from. And I think in the literature of animal magnetism, you have plenty of this. The term rapport is coming from there. Electricity, absolutely. Electricity is something that is very important also in that context. And rapport comes originally from animal magnetism and goes, in the end, up to psychoanalysis. So this is the origin of the term. And finally, how do we know that the letter is actually addressed to Bulwer-Lytton?
It's not actually. That's the thing. But it's
Right.
addressed the way that we have the full letter translated.
I have read the letter too, and I doubt that it was actually sent to Bulwer-Lytton.
I think that it seems like it was sent to, like, Lytton had requested somebody to go as a go-between anonymously, because at the beginning of the letter it's like, Levy's like, here is a letter that you can give to your famous correspondent.
Right.
And so I'm thinking that perhaps the letter, because it was in Lytton's collection,
Yeah.
perhaps it was sent through a go-between, a random, because, I think Lytton was also, given his position, he was also very sensitive about being open about what he was actually doing with Levy. And in fact, it's signed Alphonse Louis Constant.
Yeah.
So it's very, that's my interpretation of it. I think
but that's an important point, because that means that there was a mediator between the two. And even the tone of the letter seems to show that they were not so close to each other.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't give you an impression of familiarity between the two, right? So it makes me think that perhaps this episode of the meeting, maybe it's something that has been invented. That it's,
the evocation itself, I think that's debatable, because we don't have. I think there's a
right,
there's
the one
actually,
in Regent Street. I mean, yeah.
Yes, I mean we know guaranteed that Levy did come and he did do something. I think it was in 1854. But we don't, and actually we do know that Levy and a Polish count, met at Lytton's estate a few times. We do know for a fact that happened, but we don't know if he was actually, we can't say for sure if they did something in this very romantic, at the top of this tower on Regent Street. We can't say that for sure. But I mean, when I was there, there's just so many letters. Some of them don't have any. It's a lot to go through.
Can I say just one small thing? And about the possible membership of Bulwer-Lytton of some kind of occult brotherhood. There's also this famous story of Emma Hardinger Britten.
The Orphic Club?
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that any of this is true, but I think it's an interesting anecdote, because there you have the story of this guy who says that when he was young, he was hired, used, let's say, by this occult brotherhood, occult society. And Bulwer-Lytton is supposed to be one of the members of this. And this, if I remember correctly, is supposed to have happened in the 1830s or 40s or something like that. So, but we have no documentary evidence apart from the novel.
Jocelyn Godwin mentions that he says that he thinks that Lytton was actually a member of something called the Brotherhood of...
Luxor?
No, it was something before that. I forgot the name of it, and that's what he was equating with potentially the Orphic Club, if that actually existed. But again, it could also be something that's very nebulous, like this idea of occultists saying, "Oh, we're interested in this," and that's technically the Orphic Club.
Let's get I think there's a question up front here.
Me?
That's you.
Oh, yes. Hi. Sorry, I got distracted for a second.
So on this slide, we talk about dreamcasters and how they have natural or acquired abilities. But then if you go back to one of the slides that you showed at the beginning about magic, that specifically says that to him magic was a natural thing and it was something that you were born with. I wondered if you had something comment about that.
Which slide?
The one that I took a picture of. The letter itself.
Oh, the letter.
Yeah. So I do believe in the substance of what used to be called magic. That is
Oh, the
belief
next,
that there are
yeah, I think it's the
persons-
next slide.
Yeah, it's
There we go.
so the peculiar temperament is almost. It seems to me that the idea of magic and the idea of dream casting are almost two separate things, and they require different skills. And one of them is acquired, and the other one is natural. Do you agree? Does that make any sense? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah,
on that?
I see what you're driving at. I think that particularly in this quote, he's thinking about part of what he's thinking about are spiritualists. So in that sense, when you talk about the typical mystic, where it's something being somebody who's very inherently very impressionable, and there's something being that's running through them. That whenever if you're having a séance, there's these things happening only through them. But at the same time, you can have somebody who's more pushing very strongly with the willpower, who has this access and who's used a lot of concentration. Somebody like Levi. That's another example of somebody who does have a peculiar temperament. I mean, his life is quite interesting. But at the same time, he's in control of these things. So I would say that there are different meanings to this, but it's still it doesn't what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't contradict. That's what I would say.
They're similar things, they go together, but they're not the same thing. Like
Yeah.
casters and magicians, they're not necessarily the same.
I would say
What are they?
if you talk okay. That's a
Sorry,
good question.
no,
No. I see what you're going with this. So if we go to what I said about my statement about dreamcasters, in that sense, I guess it wouldn't be applicable to. I guess only part of it would be applicable to somebody who's completely supine or completely prone to being possessed, where they aren't in control of what's happening, but it happens in a situational environment and it's just flowing out through them. Whereas a dreamcaster who comes into a room and says actively through their intellect, I'm going to set up something, I guess that would be more accurate. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Of course, yes.
Does that help? I might have been rambling a bit.
My question was actually if Lytton ever speaks, because usually, as you say, that your theory is that the dream casting can either be innate, natural, or can be acquired. Does he ever speaks about it? How can you acquire it? Is there like a certain like a curriculum, for instance, that you study, or if it's just something, or not? I mean, like. If you look at Zanoni, there's a way of transmitted knowledge, for instance.
True, but then Glendon fails ultimately.
Exactly.
That's because he's weak, not because the material.
Yeah, that's
So basically, you have to be the witch. You have to have the witch blood in a way.
In that sense, Glendon is like the
But
Anakin
again, I
Skywalker.
don't think he fails because he hasn't got the blood in him, has it? It's in his heritage. That's why he's picked to be trained. It's because he doesn't meet the challenge. He's not empowered at that moment when it.
Yeah, he was too reactive. But I would say that in his letters, I haven't found anything like that. But in his books, particularly in Godolphin, where there's a figure called Volkman, who's this mystical Gandalf-like guy, and he's speaking about how one is able to use sympathy before the point of death to see like your family or spirits or something like that. And he says that you need to devote a lot of time to solitude, to concentration, to thinking, to pretty much what Levi says about trying to isolate your persona and getting as deep as you can into who you supposedly the true will, this sort of thing. So I think, I would say that that's the way.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? We've got like 2 minutes. We'll just continue this over lunch. We'll do that.